morning if you are joining us from Europe, or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you are. And welcome to this circular talk in the context of a limited, it's called the Circular Economy in the context of a limited supply of biomass, ways forward to address biodiversity loss and climate change. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alberto Arroyo Snell. I am responsible for policy and program at the International Union for Conservation of Nature European Regional Office in Brussels. This is, as you know, a Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform event. And before we start, just very quick housekeeping rules. I need to ask everybody to please keep yourself muted and have your cameras off, except the speakers, of course. We are going to record this session. It will be after published in the YouTube channel of the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform and also in the website. If you have any questions anyway, of course, please place them in the chat. We have a large number of participants today, so in principle, we will be collecting those questions through the chat today. And yes, I was saying, if you could please keep your cameras in principle off and keep yourself muted, just because, as I said, we are really a large number of people, and this will be the way to ensure that we have a smooth conversations. Anyway, we are here to discuss about one of the challenges that we have in relation with circular economy. As you know very well, circular economy is a great concept, but it's here to serve its purpose. And therefore, we are trying to ensure that circular economy retains the value of materials for as long as possible. The biomass is one of the challenges in the context of the discussion of circular economy and its relation with biodiversity and climate change. And here we hope to advance a little bit today in this discussion. This is happening in the context of the Leadership Group of Biodiversity and Climate Change of the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform Coordination Group. So as you see, there is already a challenge, or there's already a way to ensure that we address the issue that circular economy really responds to the issue that was designed for, so to achieve the environmental targets. Now, to start to warm up a little bit the discussion, because we hope to have a discussion with you today, we are going to ask you a question through a poll. It's a very simple question. It's simply to know what is your area of expertise, so we can have an idea of who is here joining us and from which kind of sector or side of the life, if you want, you are coming. This is simply, as I said, to have some first impression of the audience that we are having here today. And while you are answering to this question, I'm going to introduce the first session of the meeting today, which is going to be a set of presentations to some keynote speakers. And we have today the luck to have a good number of very prominent people and people that can help us understand a little bit how is the discussion happening around biodiversity, climate change, and circular economy. So we have Tobias Nielsen from the European Environmental Agency, who will tell a little bit about the circular economy as an approach to mitigate biodiversity loss. We have Sonia Esser for Sinn & Wandel. She will tell us a little bit about the greenwashing risk of switching to biomass as a way to implement circular economy. We also have Tim Forslund from Citra, who will tell us about the limits to circular biomass supply. And we have my colleague Barbara Villa-Overt from IUCN, who will tell us about the policy context. But before we enter into the panel discussion to set the scene, as I was saying, from these keynote speakers, let me provide some minutes first to the European Economic and Social Committee from Maria Nicolopoulou, who is the Vice President of the NAT section at this committee, to tell us a little bit about the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. So Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alberto. Good morning, everyone. By now, I'm sure that most of you know what the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform is, but since we always have newcomers, I will briefly present it to you, and the ESC as well. So the platform is a joint project that we launched the European Economic and Social Committee with the European Commission 5 years ago, with the idea to have a platform facilitated at the European level, but driven by the stakeholders on the ground. So the main objective was to speed up the circular transition. So we created a one-stop shop for the circular economy community. It's mostly virtual, but once a year as well, we meet in Brussels physically in our yearly conference. So it's a place for dialogue among the existing circular economy initiatives. So there's on one side the website where you can find useful content that comes from the stakeholders, that come from you. And we also create space for debate, be it as the event that is organized today, the EUCircularTalks, or the debates generated in our Twitter and LinkedIn account. So the activities are mainly organized by the coordination group of 24 members, as Alberto was also mentioning. They come from different organizations related to circular economy, and themselves they are also organized in thematic leadership groups, for example, as the one Alberto and IUCN they're leading on biodiversity and climate that aims to create more synergies between bioeconomy, circularity, and climate and biodiversity. And then the ESE, in its role as a consultative body, we also act as a driver for sustainability. We identify the different barriers and we express it in our opinions. So what we bring is a consensus among the different point of views and different and sometimes diverging interests in this sense. So when we prepare an opinion, apart from the fact that the members who are drafting the document, they come from different organizations, from employers, from trade unions, from other sectors, we also organize thematic exchanges with a wider range of civil society actors. And in several opinions that we have done already on bioeconomy and circularity, we see that nature-based solutions and the bioeconomy and the transition to a circular economy are essential for climate adaptation. So we stress that policymakers must promote sustainable biomass production and mobilization within the EU and ensure a stable, reliable, and coherent framework for investments in the bioeconomy through value chains. Now, the demand on biomass is only going to increase. And while we already know that there are limits to the biomass that we can produce in a sustainable way, so we need to do more with less and make more bioeconomy a circular one. Now, the last year's bioeconomy strategy progress report identified two major gaps that we can act upon: how to better manage land and biomass demands to stay within the planetary boundaries, and how to work on more sustainable consumption patterns to enhance environmental integrity. And in this respect, we need a sustainable circular bioeconomy, which means better coherence between the bioeconomy and the circular economy policies. Of course, research and innovation are essential to keep resources at the highest value as long as possible, while, of course, ensuring the natural capital is preserved. So I do invite you all to check out the platform, to get inspired by it, to submit your own content. Don't forget also to sign up to our newsletter and follow the social media. And I'm looking forward to hearing from our panel discussion. So thank you very much. Back to you, Alberto.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this introduction and also for hosting us also, because as we know, the committee is the one who is, if you want, mother or the starting point of all these discussions that we're having today. I'm going to very quickly just let you know the results from the poll. Circular economy has been the most prominent word. That's, of course, something that we could expect, but also business and biodiversity, policy, government, and many others. So it's good to keep in mind that these are the kind of, if you want, audience that we have today for the discussion. And this said, I'm going to give the word to the first panelist, which is Tobias. Tobias, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll just upload my slides, and as they're coming up. So the topic or the title of my presentation is the benefits to biodiversity of a strong circular economy. So this presentation is based on an EEA briefing and also an ETC technical report, which just came out yesterday. So it's fresh off the press, so to speak. And in this briefing and in technical report, we want to highlight that circular economy is not an end in itself. So it's a means to an end. And one of these ends is to reduce biodiversity loss from production and consumption systems. At the same time, we also want to shift the discussion over to our biodiversity colleagues and say that, circular economy should also figure more into policies directed at reducing biodiversity loss, such as the biodiversity strategy, the global agreement to halt biodiversity loss at the UN, and also well, we'll see what happens with the EU nature law restoration, which will be voted on at the parliament in just a few days. But these things should also really much include what circular economy can do for biodiversity. So we're trying to bring these two sort of avenues together. And by the way, I'm talking a lot about biodiversity, but of course, there's a lot of these mechanisms and topics that are very similar when it comes to climate emissions. So here, our production and consumption is also very much an underlying cause of CO2 emissions, and the talks around how to mitigate should not only be about energy efficiency and renewable energy, but also about how we change our production and consumption systems. But anyways, for today's presentation, I'll go down the biodiversity branch, and I'll talk a little bit about the drivers of biodiversity loss, just so that we have I saw there were some people that are experts on biodiversity, but for the rest of us that deal mainly with circular economy, I'll just highlight the key drivers, and then the role of circular economy in reducing biodiversity loss, and also how we can promote a more biodiversity inclusive circular economy. So I hope this is clear for you. It's a bit murky on my slide. Anyway, so these are the 5 different key drivers of biodiversity loss. And I think it's also important for us just to bear in mind the state of biodiversity at the moment. It's of course under severe threat. I think the figures are around 1 million species that are under threat, and that for some we're already in the midst of a 6th mass extinction. So the rate of species loss is as high now as when the comet plowed into the Earth. So that's worth remembering. Now, this, of course, is a global concern, but being at the European Environment Agency, I have highlighted some of the examples for how this is evident in Europe. So if we look at them, we can see the first one is habitat loss. So that's the reduction of natural habitats due, for example, to agriculture expansions, but also due to fragmentation of habitats from transport infrastructure, for example. And the example from Europe is that European wetlands have declined by around 50% since the 70s. Another key driver is overexploitation. That's basically when we take out more from ecosystems than ecosystems can replenish. And the example from Europe is that renewable water resources per capita has decreased 24% across Europe since the 70s. Another one is climate change, and this is also here where some of the two themes come together. So we can see that the climate change impacts biodiversity, extreme weathers, changing weather patterns, impacts species' abilities to survive, but it also has a knock-on effect on climate change. So as we lose biodiversity, we lose the capacity of nature to suck up carbon and store carbon, and then we also reduce nature's resilience to deal with these extreme weather impacts that we're seeing. An example we have here is that the 5 warmest years on record in Europe have occurred since 2014, and I'm pretty sure that we are on schedule to have just another record year this year. Pollution is when chemicals were used for production leak into nature and damage the natural environments or the ecosystems. A key example from Europe is the amount of nitrogen runoff from fertilizer has led to critical loads of eutrophication in 3/4 of total water systems in Europe. And the last one is in invasive alien species. So all of us that have gardens know what this means. But on a European level, the costs of invasive alien species around 12 billion a year. So just to highlight some of the key drivers that we have to deal with if we are to sort of halt biodiversity loss. Now, if we look at so those are the ones on the right column, the drivers. If you take one step back, we can look at some of the pressures, and these are anthropogenic activities that that lead to these drivers. So they're the pressures in the IPES lingo. You could also call them indirect drivers. So the land use, our use of materials, energy reuse, both fossil but also biofuels, for example, and waste and emissions all have an impact on the drivers. And if we then take one step further back and we go to sort of the root of the problem, as has been labeled by others, the heart of biodiversity loss is our production and consumption system. So one telling figure is from the International Resource Panel, which has come out and said that around 90% of biodiversity loss can be attributed to extraction and processing of primary resources, just to give one example. So we need to change the consumption and production system if we are to reduce the pressures and drivers of biodiversity loss. And for us, we have 3 ways that the circular economy can do this. The first one is reducing primary resource demand. So it's one of these circles you can see on the figure, and that's a lot of this is like the core circular economy activities. So reducing or smarter consumption, extending product lifespans, recycling, and so on. All these lead to lower demands for primary resources, which again has a positive benefits for biodiversity. We can also think about preventing pollution. So again, making sure that first of all, phasing out hazardous substances, but also reducing emissions and other forms of leakage. Promoting cleaner loops. This has also, of course, an impact in reducing biodiversity loss, and also has an impact, as materials contain less hazardous substance, they also become more recyclable. The last one is the one that we need to focus more attention on, and that is on the biodiversity-friendly sourcing, as we call it. So that's about looking at not just about closing loops and cleaning loops, but also what comes into these loops. So making sure that the resources that we do have to use are clean and sourced in a biodiversity-friendly manner. So the bottom line, and literally also the bottom line of this figure, is that if we do not succeed in changing our production and consumption systems, this will impact biodiversity, and also this will come back and haunt us, both reducing, I guess, the quality of the production consumption system, but also very much reducing the quality of life. So for the last slide, how to promote a more biodiversity inclusive circular economy. As I mentioned, a lot of the things that are embedded in circular economy has a positive impact on biodiversity. So much of the things we have to do is about scaling up existing practices. But we also need to focus more on biodiversity loss, on biodiversity, so that it becomes a key feature of circular economy, and we know which actions we can emphasize to have a larger impact, and that we factor in biodiversity very much from the beginning where we design these actions. And the third area, as I mentioned, the biodiversity-friendly sourcing, this is the one that we have to think a bit more about when we talk about circular economy. How can we both make sure that our resource extraction has less harm in nature, and also how can we move, when it's possible, towards a more regenerative practices, so that we, in some instances, can give back more than we take out from nature. All these things require a number of different stakeholders. Policymakers need to have more integrated approaches that have a more systemic view on circular economy and biodiversity, linking them at different levels. We need businesses to promote more circular business models, and also to really consider material and resource use. So design stage here is critical. When you develop and design products, we need to think about what materials are used for that. And lastly, citizens play a key role both in changing consumer habits, but also sufficiency. And that's not just consumers, but also private and public actors really need to think about how we can make our loops small as well, if we are to achieve the aim of reducing biodiversity loss. So thank you very much. And if you're interested, I think there'll be a link to the briefing and the technical report in the chat.
Thank you very much, Tobias. And actually, yes, the link is already there for anybody interested. This report actually was released only yesterday. So everything is very, very modern and recent at the moment. And with this, I give the word to our second keynote speaker, Sonia Esser from Sinn & Wandel. Sonia, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we know that all customers like bio-based material, and tree is a good fellow, and people transfer the plant characteristic to the product. A tree is sustainable, so products from wood or other plant-based materials are seen as environmental friendly also. And consumers love the idea that they will cause no harm to nature while buying even more of those products. Even disposable one-way products they would not buy made from non-renewables. And my design students really love the idea that with using bio-based material, they don't have to come up with complicated design techniques for making materials separable after use or optimizing cycling pathways, because they think the product will rot anyway and doesn't harm the environment. So switching to biomass seems to be the best way to implement a circular economy. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. With a circular product development, one needs to think about the end of use and how to design for multiple life cycles. That's one of the basic understanding. And at the moment, making a bio-based materials or product biodegradable seems to be more a pollution reduction strategy to reduce the damage when this material is released into the environment. And made for composting with the idea to return nutrients to the soil is unfortunately not really working at the moment. There are no disposal systems in place for compostable products except the home compost. All material that is not salad or cucumber are pulled out in the industrial composting plants because they decompose more slowly. So where do we actually put all those compostable t-shirts or bioplastics? Putting everything on their own compost will not solve the resource scarcity problem and even may create, in a case of poor compost management, the emission of methane. So compostable products usually, they also have no nutritional value and do not contribute to humus formation. At best, they decompose into carbon dioxide and water. So this is a problem we need to solve with using all this biomass into circular economy. And second, as we have heard already from Tobias, biomass is not environmentally friendly per se, nor does it solve the resource scarcity when we are adding more and more primary biomass to the economy. And biomass will not be endlessly available, as Tim will show us in some minutes. So just bringing a bit of bio-based material into the value chain of a product and claim that this is now a sustainable product due to carbon footprint calculation leaves many environmental issues aside and bears the risk of greenwashing. Many greenhouse gases are generated by the cultivation, harvesting, processing, and we also need to consider the carbon emissions from disturbed ecosystems and soils. And also, we have seen that not all of this material is produced biodiversity friendly. When we look at the figures, 90% of biodiversity losses are due to extraction of biomass resources. Now, the clear answer is biomass is not biodiversity friendly per se. We should be very careful to select only, as Tobias has coined, biodiversity friendly, as we say, sustainably grown, renewable or harvested resources as a circular inflow. But bio-based material is very popular, and some actors even want to change the circular economy into a bioeconomy. But just substituting one material with the other, one technique with another, will continue, in my perspective, business as usual, produce the same systems and same structures as we already have today, aiming even for an increased exploitation of natural resources with better techniques, but we will fail to transform our economy. So for using biomass, we need to integrate that into a strong sustainable framework, which is create circular economy. This is such a sustainability framework. It's not about replacing one material with another, but about changing the whole system, the systems of organizations, production, consumption, about rethinking what we do and how we do it to adapt the economy into the planetary boundaries. And one important building block of circular economy is to keep resources in circulation for longer with strategies like design for reuse and recycling, maximizing the use of recycled material within design. And circular economy companies usually also design a system around the product to enable circulation and to guarantee that the resource is maintained and recovered. So currently, bioeconomy is providing resources which can be used as inroads into the cycles of a circular economy. But most of their processes are not yet part of the full biological or technical cycle. And planning for end-of-use and multiple life cycles are requirements that are needed to be implemented also for bio-based material and products, as secondary materials have the least impact on global warming or biodiversity. All these strategies for system change must also be communicated within the frameworks of current and future circular economy standards to avoid greenwashing, as they are part of this development toward a circular economy. So what would be helpful to see in those standards? They should lead to optimize the whole system towards sustainability and provide a strong framework for sustainable innovation and sustainable resource management, also for the bio-based materials. The standards need to be developed in the mindset that our human systems are embedded within the biosphere and that we are heavily dependent on healthy ecosystem, biodiversity, and ecosystem service. So standards should therefore include the appropriate definitions and principles to support biodiversity, like the classic regenerate nature principle, and advise organizations to explore how they could contribute to regenerate ecosystems, integrate regenerative practices, and try to become nature positives. Standards are part to help the communication and trade within worldwide supply chains, and decisions based on those standards will also change quantities and qualities of material flows. And we need to carefully consider how we want to change these material flows so that we do not end up with even more negative impacts. Standards for sure should not communicate a general business is sustainable idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for telling us about the risks. There are already some comments actually in the chat. We're actually now going to jump also to the limits of the circular biomass supply, which is also part of the discussion here. And Tim will help us to understand a bit better the situation. Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alberto. So I'm Tim Forslund from the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, which works on a range of different topics from democracy and fair use of data, and we also work on circular economy, biodiversity, and resources. And we're, for instance, known for the World Circular Economy Forum, which took place 2 weeks ago, and this is also a World Circular Economy Forum side event, and we do a lot of things related to this nexus now, in particular on circular economy and biodiversity. And as we're Think, Do, Connect Tank, we also do contribute to studies, and we do our own studies and co-fund studies. And one of those is the EU biomass use in a net zero economy with analytics provided by Material Economics. What that study essentially shows is that if we look at current climate scenarios, we risk over-reliance on biomass, namely 40 to up to 100% more biomass than what is sustainably available in the EU. So this just doesn't add up. So it means that we need to get a lot more value from the biomass that we already have. And since we don't have enough biomass, we need to focus on a few areas and in particular ensure coherence between different areas of EU policy. So looking at how can we make sure that we apply the same circular thinking that we have in the Circular Economy Action Plan in the EU bioeconomy strategy, for instance. We also need to set a long-term direction for biomass use, and we need to reserve biomass for high value and long-lasting applications, such as in construction and furniture, pulp, fibers and textiles and chemicals, while for bioenergy it will still play an important role in years to come, especially with products that can't be used for anything else. But over time, bioenergy will be more reserved for more highly specialized niches in the future. And we also need to create the right policies to support high value use of biomass. We'll hear a little bit more about that, and also creating the right enablers for high value biomass, high value biomass future. We don't look well, in this report, you don't see exactly the types of circular practices that can deliver all of this. It looks at the limits. But just to share some examples that I think are important, and when you talk about circular solutions for biomass in particular, we need to extend lifetimes of biomass and increase use rates where possible. And one example is Encore in Finland, which has provided loading pallets as a service, because you can simply get more value from using the loading pallet over and over. So this sense that reuse and sharing models is only for technical cycles and metals and cement and other materials, I think is a fallacy to some extent. And at Citra, we even had our Christmas tree this year as a service. And then after it was used, it could be put back in the ground and next year be used by someone again. So I think I would challenge us to think, can we use circular business models for biomass that we haven't thought about before? And we'll also hear more in a bit about reuse of and recycling of building materials so that you can get away from some of these trade-offs. That's very important, and they've done excellent work in the US. And we'll also hear more from Axe Foundation and Johan on what they have done to get more value from different species. I'd also highlight one Brazilian example, Natura & Co., which own, for instance, the Body Shop, which you might be familiar with. But by getting more value from the products that they have in the forest and diversifying production across more species than just getting timber, they've actually been able to get more value from a standing forest than by cutting it down. I mentioned then that the circular solutions that we need play a really important role. And the second study that we have published that quantifies this connection is the study tackling root causes, which shows that if we transition to a circular economy by 2050, we can by zooming in on the 4 key sectors that use large areas of land to provide biomass, we can turn the tide on biodiversity loss and enable a recovery to 2000 levels already by 2035. And with the assumptions in the study, I'll share the link in the chat in a second, but if we, for instance, look at these 4 sectors and halt food waste by half and meat consumption as well, and if we apply the same logic to the other 3 sectors to enable a circular transition, we can see that it is possible to, together with these 4 sectors, turn the tide. Otherwise, we'd lose biodiversity well past 2050. But by freeing up land that we currently use for providing more and more biomass, we can also turn the tide on biodiversity loss. And as you can see, the main focus here is really on the food and agriculture sector, because 39% of habitable land is used to provide, for instance, livestock and dairy. So, as Sonia mentioned as well, using more and more biomass is not a panacea. And you'd see if we use, for instance, more and more wood in construction, it might actually be bad for biodiversity. So here you see under buildings and construction, it's highlighted in red. So that's something to keep in mind. We can't just substitute our way out of this crisis. But we can also use circular solutions to offset some of this negative impact. So if we make buildings with less building materials in the first place, if buildings last longer, and if we can reuse and recycle more of the building materials, we can actually offset that. And that's visible here under construction timber savings on the graph. So what does this mean for EU policy? I would just highlight that the circular economy thinking needs to be mainstreamed across the whole EU Green Deal. And I think Barbara has a lot to say about this in a second. And also to mainstream resource consumption targets. We see that 4 member states already have targets for absolute resource use. So for either reducing that or for capping that. So we need to mainstream that into more countries and keeping biomass in mind, because that's not always spelled out. In Finland, it's one of the, it spells out in the 2035 target that we have for resource use. And finally, the biggest impact is in the food and agriculture sector. So let's zoom in on those solutions as well that just take up a lot of our land that we can't use for other things. So I'll stop there, and I look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was incredibly insightful. And yes, as you say, the policy implications of all this discussion are fundamental. And for that, we have a last keynote speech from my colleague, Barbara Oberts, will tell us a little bit about the policy context. Barbara, the floor is yours.
thank you. Let me just get the slides up. Okay. So I hope you can all see that. Great. So yeah, thanks very much. I'll try to keep it brief. So I'm Barbara. I'm the Senior Policy and Project Officer at IUCN's European Regional Office, working with Alberto. And so following Tobias, Sonia, and Tim, I will outline a bit now about the policy context to this discussion as well. So, okay. In our own exercise to help clarify the nexus between the circular economy and biodiversity, IUCN also produced a report which was launched at COP15 in Montreal last December. And our report focused on policy. We examined challenges and opportunities in existing policy for the circular economy and for biodiversity. We looked into the global discussion at what was being drafted at the time for the global biodiversity in terms of production and consumption. And just to mention that now, even in the final text, the circular economy is not explicitly mentioned, but there's still a lot of relevant targets there. But then we mainly focused on the EU policy framework, and we tried to illustrate some of the ways in which the two policy areas could help reinforce one another. So we zoomed in on the two most relevant files under the European Green Deal, as Tim was mentioning, which itself was an incredibly important step towards the further integration of the two policy agendas under the same umbrella. And these are the Circular Economy Action Plan and the EU Biodiversity Strategy to 2030. And we did a deep dive where we looked at the key value chain in the Circular Economy Action Plan that is the most impactful for biodiversity, and that's the food, water, and nutrients value chain. So you will see that in the key areas of this value chain, biomass and bioeconomy emerge as a central issue. Looking especially at this first key area, which we will discuss a lot about today, the sustainable use of renewable bio-based materials. The bioeconomy perhaps poses the greatest impact to biodiversity through land and resource use. And we know that a shift from fossil-based to bio-based materials is an important objective in this key area for the Circular Economy Action Plan. But indeed, thinking about how this might impact biodiversity, such a shift could lead to unintended trade-offs. For instance, a lot has been mentioned already today. If an increased demand for timber as a sustainable building material would inadvertently lead to a loss of primary forest, or in the context of a push for other bio-based solutions leading to an increased demand for primary biomass, etc. At the same time, as Tim outlined, this also means that a circular bioeconomy can have an incredible potential in tackling biodiversity loss. So bringing it back to policy, for each of these four areas, we looked into what the Circular Economy Action Plan aims to do and tried to see how that might contribute to the goals outlined in the Biodiversity Strategy to 2030. And through this deep dive, we uncovered a host of relevant policies for the circular economy and biodiversity nexus. And you can see some, I would say, on this slide. I want to reiterate that this is still not a totally exhaustive overview. There is really a lot out there that emerges as relevant to this nexus. But just to illustrate how rich the policy framework is already. So some of these policies, they came up more within the circular economy context. Others were more related with biodiversity. Sometimes there were explicit links between the two areas, but not always. And so we found that in order for circular economy policy measures to better fulfill the biodiversity targets, the links between many of these policies could stand to be further strengthened, specifically relating to the issue of biomass. For example, it would be good to ensure closer alignment of the circular economy policy framework with policies that are dealing directly with production and consumption, like the farm to fork strategy, the common agricultural policy, those that are dealing with extraction and processing of biological resources in general, so everything to do with biomass, the bioeconomy, forestry, agriculture, land use. And then even more explicit links to be made to key nature policies like the birds and habitats directives would be essential, because we've also found that circular economy policy thus far has not focused that much on the biological resources in the economy. Rather, it has been more focused on the technical components, products, materials that undergo reuse, repair, remanufacture, recycling. And yet it's precisely the biological resources that are the most impactful for biodiversity. So certain sectors, as already mentioned, food, agriculture, forestry, they hold significant potential benefits for nature and biodiversity if they were to become fully circular. Land use needs to be of central concern for circular economy policy as well, especially by supporting sustainable land use in agriculture and forestry practices and limiting the further expansion of land under cultivation. More attention will need to be paid to extraction and production, encompassing the whole life cycle and not only the end of life stage, so waste. And of course, keeping in line with the circular economy in terms of the waste hierarchy, which we all know well, much can be achieved through tackling consumption, where prevention is the first priority. So moving forward for some key takeaways, and I will land on these nice images here. So one of the key takeaways is indeed that to support the transition to a circular economy with nature at its core, it is fundamental to enhance policy coherence. Secondly, the transition to a circular economy that both begins and ends in nature and that transforms our unsustainable production and consumption systems is an invaluable tool to help us achieve our environmental targets. And as we know, that our unsustainable production and consumption systems are responsible for much of our biodiversity loss. And thirdly, also that conservation and restoration will remain crucial activities in this context, especially if we want to ensure the sustainability of our production systems, the continued use of our natural resources at all. Since we're talking about biomass today, it's important to recognize our key production sectors like agriculture and forestry are particularly dependent on healthy ecosystems. So investing in the restoration of nature, and Tobias mentioned that at the beginning of his talk, that will be crucial to the sustainability of production. And so then if we can implement the circular economy as this invaluable tool going hand in hand with these efforts as well, then we can have a real shot at tackling our interdependent crises of biodiversity loss, pollution, and climate change. So I will end on the recently agreed Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework as a guidance. So the framework also calls for policy coherence through an all-of-government approach, but importantly, it also calls for an all-of-society approach where all sectors and stakeholders are paving the path towards these important transitions. Thank you. I will end there.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And as you see, the whole policy landscape is one of the challenges and one of the things that is actually coming very much in the context of the chat. I see many questions related with different issues. Actually, as we are a little bit behind schedule, only some minutes, but this is always happening when there are important discussions and important issues to mention all the time. I encourage the speakers to answer to some of the questions in the chat, because this will mean also that the conversation is ongoing in that context. Now, Barbara was mentioning, as you have seen, the whole of society as one of the things that is always mentioned in the context of the Convention for Biodiversity. For biodiversity, yes, we always have to ensure that we work all together to ensure that we are rowing in the same direction. And in this context, now we have some examples about some specific issues, and we are going to deep dive into some of the discussions that matter most in the discussion related with biomass. So first of all, I want to thank our speakers and ensure that they stay here. As I said, they can answer to some of the questions in the chat, and also they will be available later on for the discussion. I will be really happy to try to have some time, even if it's short, to have some questions at the end. So I'm going to ask our now panelists, or let's say example bearers, let's say, to keep to the time that we more or less established, so around 10 minutes per example. We will have 5 minutes for a presentation from the example holder if you want, and after there will be a short conversation between that person and one of the panelists before. So as I said, please try to keep the time. I will enter only to say there is 1 minute left in 1 millisecond so you are aware that that is the situation. And with this said, I'm going to give the word now to our first example, who is going to be presented by Johan Siedenmark, Project Manager in Circular Economy from the Axe Foundation. And after it will be followed by with a conversation with Tim. Johan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me share my slides. And I'm working as project manager at Axe Foundation, and I'm a biologist, and we are a Swedish independent non-profit organization working practically to accelerate solutions for a sustainable world. And in our projects, we always work hands-on and together with a wide range of actors, and we usually involve the whole value chain in partnership with researchers and the scientific community. And we only work on solutions that benefit the whole sector that we are working with, not a single actor or a single company. And collaboration is the key to everything we do at Axe Foundation. And we always share our solutions and make sure they are both scalable and economically viable. And as you all know, we are facing numerous environmental and social challenges and action. Lots of action is what is needed. And we know also that many leaders, unfortunately, are holding back because they have difficulties to figure out how to make this effort profitable. And this is where Axe Foundation can make a difference and where we usually comes in our projects. And we also define ourselves more like a do tank than a think tank. And we believe that business is a driving force for change. So me and my 20 colleagues at Axe Foundations, we are economists, agronomists, we are behavioral and political scientists and biologists. We are running about 30 projects today with over 300 partners across 15 sectors and with 70 researchers. And we address challenges within the things we buy, the food we eat, and the resources we use. And we work within 3 program areas that are sustainable production and consumption, circular economy, and future of the food. And some of the examples of the projects we are running now are digital product passports. We're working together with GS1 to develop open solutions for companies and climate education tools for SMEs. And I will make a more look into how we work with these cases in 2 different cases. That is how we use underutilized fish species and how we can make better use of press residues from oat cream production. And the first project we started that was making a value out of Swedish bycatch. And the problem is that in seafood in Sweden, it's currently dependent on 4 fish types. That's salmon, cod, herring, and shrimp. And most of this is imported. I think more than 2/3 are imported. And it's mainly farmed fish that we import. But we would like to increase the human consumption of fish from the Baltic and the Swedish lakes. And today the fishermen, they get many fish that are considered bycatch, and they go directly to produce biogas. So we started to look into this and started a project with the whole value chain in the Swedish fishery, from the fishermen and to the process industry and to fast-moving consumer goods company and restaurants. And the challenge is that the fish from the lake is often very bony and it's not very appreciated. So we started to make tests on the fish and try to do different dish, but our test panel did not like it. So we needed to find a machine that could separate the bones from the fish. And there was no such infrastructure in Sweden. But we actually found a machine in Finland that we invested in and made a lot of investment so we could separate the bones from the fish. And then we had a minced fish product that was aimed for human consumption. And we made it into fish cakes in Asian style. So we serve it in schools and also we serve in the elderly homes. And it's now available in all supermarkets in Sweden. And we have introduced locally grown broad bean into the fish cake. That then we get a better taste and we get a better structure of the product. But also we increase the nutrient load and get a very good price on the product. So it's comparable to fish sticks. And also we have reduced the carbon footprint compared to the salmon. It's only 1/3 of the carbon footprint. And by using this bycatch, we stabilize ecosystem in Swedish lake because those fishes are normally eating zooplankton. So we also get a healthy food that's nutritious and safe, and we can give the fishermen a really fair price for their old stock. So they get the same price for the bycatch as for the other fish. And then we had another project that we're starting up now. We make bread and cookies from plant-based and nutrient-dense upcycled ingredients from oat milk production. And this project started when we was invited to the largest oat milk production facility in Sweden. And we were there to talk about ice cream production from oat milk. And they said they have a lot of residues that they only use for biogas, or farmers come and collect it and use it as fertilizer. And they actually have to pay the farmers to transport for the residue away. So we took some sample with us, and we have a large test kitchen and outside Stockholm, and started to see what we can do with it. And we made some bread and cookies and also cereals. And we had a proof of concept, and it's absolutely no problem to use. And now we're looking into doing a protein bar of this. And we recently got this project financed to do more research on the nutrition composition and what the residue is made of. But we know it's very rich in protein and it's very rich in fiber. And in Sweden, 7 out of 10 adults don't eat enough fiber. So it's good that we can make some products out of this. And we have started to make cracker bread. And that's a product that is used in very large amounts. And we can use it in school as well. But the main challenge is still the infrastructure in the factory. So we need to set up a second line to get this residual Okara product out for safe handling and transport. And we can also extrude protein and fibers, but we think that is to overcomplicate. So we look into the cracker bread. And with this Okara in Sweden, 25,000 tons yearly, we can make 56 million cracker packets like those are sold in the market today. So that's a huge environmental loss we are not using. And if we use that for making bread, we can replace the need of cultivation of oat on large areas, and also reducing the primary resource consumption. And this is just a picture of how we do when we work with the whole value chain, that we involve the producers, and then we have the market involved and researchers. And then we always work with 5 to 6 researchers in every project. So this is the way we run projects, and it's not easy all the times because there's many different cultures. And also we have a clash within culture with business and scientific community sometimes. But we enjoy it a lot, and we love to finding practical solutions on different challenges that's out there that we know that the business have problem to solve by themselves. But this is how we make sustainability happen. And I think I will stop my introduction here, so open up for questions.
Yes, Tim, you have a couple of minutes now for a discussion.
Thank you, Alberto, and thank you, Johan. I would just like to highlight again that we need these circular solutions that can help find that are particularly important for biodiversity. And I think Johan's examples are really brilliant because they show how we can get more value from biomass and then also relieve pressures on land use from biomass. And I think the fish case in particular, Johan knows that I really like this case because it's also regenerative in the sense that Johan alluded to this through a process known as biomanipulation, that you can restore the balance of the lakes when there's less predation on zooplankton, and in turn there's less, the water gets less turbid, and yeah, you can have a more balanced ecosystem basically. So I think it has a kind of double biodiversity benefit. So I just like to highlight that. But one quick question to Johan. I think we need more of these solutions and we need them to be more successful. But if there's 1 or 2 things that you think are really needed to change to make sure that we can have more of these cases, what would be the thing that you would highlight the most?
That is always to make sure that all the solutions are scalable and economically viable. So we always do a really good business model case out of every project we do. And also we have had many fails that we actually have seen. This is not a good example, but at least then we know this is not working. So, but we embrace all our fails and we always look into the business idea. And also I think that we need to talk, we work very close to business and many SMEs. And we need to get this higher up on the agenda and also into the company's articles of association. Today it's that they should maximize profit, but I think we should instead they should maximize resource use. So they start thinking differently, and everyone knows that using a resource in an efficient way is good business.
Thank you very much, Johan and Tim, for this short conversation. This was incredibly interesting, I have to say, to show exactly how the things can work. We are looking for examples, and this is exactly the kind of things that can help in this discussion. This was about regenerative actions in agriculture and fisheries, as you have seen. Now we are going to jump to the second example, which is about construction with reused wood. And we have here with us Professor Andrea Kringel to help us from the CRS Architekten. And she will have a short presentation for us, followed by a short conversation with Sonia. So Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alberto, for the nice introduction. I'm jumping right into the topic due to the time constraints. So just showing you the situation in Germany that we have related to timber. We have roughly per year 11 million tons of waste wood coming from different streams. And 10 million goes to what we call, in a positive way, energetic recovery. But what happens there is we lose, obviously, the material itself, and we emit the carbon that is stored in the timber far too early. And we have only 1 million tons that go into the production of chipboards, which again is a downcycling process. So this is how the situation looks really in Europe. Nobody's identifying timber waste wood as a resource. So we were working on it in a European research project, and this was the idea when we started. So we would identify the waste wood in our building stock, where we dismantle at the moment quite a lot of attics in order to generate residential space. So we would rework it and bring it back into the construction sector. What we learned is one of the major hurdles here is that if we deal with waste wood, we have to make sure that we're not dealing with treated waste wood, so harmful substances that might have been applied in the past. And this is the main driver. So you need to undertake investigations on site, and nobody wants to do it because it's time consuming and costly, apparently. So everybody declares waste wood category 4, and everything goes to energetic recovery. So this is the main problem. There are a few other issues to resolve regarding strengths and metal impurities. But just focusing on the harmful substances, we identified a strategy how to overcome this, because you can make it visible. And if you cut it off, you have basically fresh wood. So this is how we approached the entire topic, and were quite successful. And we, in the research project, we had the opportunity to develop a non-load bearing facade element, and even here we really tried to implement the cascading use of timber. Just jumping back again, because we have different sections. So we have solid sections, but we have also spans and dust, and this is all what we can use for different members of such an element, for instance. So this is what we promote with the research, and this is how we implement it. This was really just small scale, a 2-story demonstrator where we were able to construct this element from waste wood. We were also looking into other things, other structural things, internal partition walls, but also insulation materials. So there's a lot of possibilities, but for the time being, it's not really picked up by the industry. Sorry, and this is just showing another project where we go into the structural application, where students picked up the idea and they developed this structural system on the basis of the difficulties with waste wood, sometimes that you have smaller sections, and they developed this structural girder that they implemented within 2 months in Berlin. And again, this is just another really, really good example how we can use waste wood also in a structural way. And this is just the last project I want to show you that we implemented in our office, and it's just a promotion of what we can learn from the past, because this building has been designed according to circular principles. The wood has been cut in 1810 that we found out, and the building has been relocated several times. So we did this project together with the client, and it's a wonderful showcase how we need to design in the future again, and how it's possible to implement circular construction in the construction industry, which is really important in order to bring the CO2 emissions down, but also the enormous resource consumption that we have. And just just to finish off, in construction, we can't really afford to bank on CO2 intensive materials like concrete or insulation materials like mineral wool, or even worse, EPS. We really need to implement bio-based materials in order to make this shift. And because we heard already, the pressure on bio-based materials is enormous, and therefore we need to implement the circular construction urgently. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this interesting, very interesting way of dealing with this used wood. How can we support this way of circular construction? Is there possibilities, other possibilities to extend it, to scale it up, so that we have these, more of these?
There are. I think we need really politics in a way. I mean, we need to the shift on different scales, and but politics need to put it down as the main principle of construction. If we don't have sort of like the law in place where we need to think in circular terms, nobody will do it, because it's more time. And it's for the time being, it's a little bit more expensive. So money is always the driving force. So we need sort of like incentives that we need to plan according to this principle. And also we need urgently threshold values for CO2 emissions, because at the moment this is not in place. So we can still use building products that are very CO2 intensive, and also in a way that we waste them after one cycle. And this is really a problem. And we need different standards, because there's a lot to do. Construction is difficult, right? So you don't just take a waste wood beam and you bring it back into a building, because there's so many liability issues. So we need the standards to be in place to support this principle of circular economy.
And if I remember right, from what you've explained to us, to use this wood again is a bit more difficult than having fresh wood, of course. But for going into the future, if we start with fresh wood for new buildings, I think it's also necessary to have other ways of construction, so that we will have not these constraints or challenges that you have at the moment. So there's also a way of changing in architecture and construction, right, for the future necessary.
Absolutely. Also in timber construction, we can do a lot better now. Wood preservatives is yesterday. We don't need it. We can resolve it through the construction itself. And we can sort of like record what we've implemented into a building. So it's much easier to take it down, to disassemble it rather than to demolish it, things like that. And I think this is really fundamental and key, because I can only say that we don't have the materials, other sort of like fossil-based materials in the future. So we need to think about material efficiency. The pressure on bio-based material will increase significantly. So we need to apply these principles. And the good thing is that with bio-based materials, circular economy is much easier. That's also one learning curve from a large-scale European project. So we just need to promote it. We need to promote the research, which is happening at the moment, and then we can pave the way really to this major shift that we need to achieve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was very interesting, really very interesting. Fascinating to see these examples, clear examples of how the things could work in future. We have heard about agriculture, we have heard about construction, and now we go to a third sector that is also fundamental here, to the textile fibers. And the title of actually this example is Textile Fibers in Infinite Circles. We have here with us Tanya Karila from Infinite Fiber, who will present for 5 minutes, and after we'll have a short conversation with Tobias. Tanya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's been really nice to present Infinited Fiber Company's case here after all this presentation and hearing how the biodiversity, circularity, and other sustainability topics are in the kind of agendas of everyone. So I'll now tell how our solution contributes in this area. So Infinited Fiber Company's mission is to make textile circularity an everyday reality. And why we can say that is that we have a solution how our technology turns cellulose-rich materials like cotton-rich textile waste into premium textile fiber, which we call Infinna. I will soon show how it really happens. So relevant to this event is our philosophy. Nothing needs to be grown when you make the most of what's already in circulation. So we really think that helping the planet is to implement circular practices and to use waste that would otherwise be, in textile industry case, landfilled or burned. So this is how it happens, how our process goes. If we start from the picture number 1, we take in cotton-rich textile waste, like T-shirts, jeans, hoodies. We first take the hard parts out, like zippers and buttons, and shred the material into small pieces, small shreds, like 6 millimeter fiber length. In our process, we only need cellulose, so we clean the material from other fibers such as polyester or elastane or dyes and capture the cellulose, which is the middle product of the second phase of the project. So we clean the textile waste to capture the cellulose material. We add urea into it and process it with high temperatures, creating a cellulose carbamate powder. In picture 3, you can see really it's a powder-like material and it's essentially cellulose carbamate. And this phase is required to make cellulose dissolvable. So after making it into powder format, we dissolve it and utilize the standard wet spinning machinery known in the viscose industry and push our liquid through small nozzles into spinning bath, and the fiber starts to crystallize. It creates a long fiber filament, which we then cut into standard lengths, 35 millimeter, 42 millimeter, which is the staple fiber product known by the textile industry. So that is essentially our process and our product, Infinna, which we then send to yarn production, fabric production, and finally garment production. And after the use of clothing, it circulates back into our process. Then for this 5-minute session, I wanted to pick one visualization that has been really important for advancing our business and which supports our scale up, I think, quite nicely. In the middle, you can see a circular value chain, which we want to obviously create from a current linear value chain where a lot of waste is created. 1 garbage truck of textile waste is landfilled or burned every second globally. So creating this circular value chain has been in our agenda from day 1. And it doesn't happen by one company only. And obviously, it doesn't happen in isolation. So first of all, we have found brands, textile brands that have in their agendas like strong sustainability targets or circularity targets even. On the left-hand side, you can see the ones that we have publicly announced, but all starts from the market, I would say. So we have the relevance. But obviously other players need to develop themselves as well, like textile waste collection and sorting system. In EU, this is regulated, and 2025, every country needs to collect post-consumer textile waste. And we need solutions for that. And we feel that our technology is solution for cotton-rich textile waste. And as mentioned, we provide it further in the value chain to be produced into yarn and fabric and so forth. And kind of outside this value chain, a lot needs to happen still to kind of make this really a mainstream solution. So obviously we need investors, and as for example, Andrea mentioned, regulation standards, so forth, needed. Engineering companies, we are still a 70% company. We rely on engineering partners and our equipment suppliers. We have triple amount of engineers working with us. It is through collaboration with the whole ecosystem. It also requires authorities such as permitting and so forth to be in line with this kind of circular practices. And obviously research institutes, universities are playing key role in making this happen. So maybe this was my 5 minutes of our business, and with these collaborations, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for questions, if any.
Okay, thank you very much, Tanya. I think this is really impressive, both to hear your technical solutions, sorting materials that are already in circulation rather than having to go out and extract them from cotton fields, which is where the big impact lies from textiles. Also really interesting to see the ecosystem, as you phrase it, that is needed, the collaborations with other actors that is needed to really make these solutions work. I was wondering if, what tips would you give other organizations that are working on circular economy and biodiversity or climate change?
Well, maybe because I'm a marketing person, I would say know the market, know the customers, make it feasible from the business perspective. Also, at the same time, when you are solving some issue that we have here in planet. So nowadays it is like important to have both because of the investors making ESG safe investments and so forth. So you need to have the sustainability plan in place as well, but customers are as important as that part, so that you really can scale up, I think.
All right. Yeah. And we're talking a little bit before this session about how things have changed really fast in the textiles sector. But what gives you hope, or what makes you optimistic about circular business strategies and how they can impact the environment?
If you particularly ask like the hope side, I think I had just this week or last week, and still the fair ITMA is ongoing in Milan, and there the discussion has changed since the last fair. I think I don't need to explain to people why circular textile fibers are needed. Everyone knows the regulation supports that, brands want it, consumers want it. So the relevance is there. But what I needed to explain is that why can't we scale faster? So that is, it gives hope. And also like hearing all these presentations before me, it gives hope that this is so holistically kind of advanced within EU and obviously in other continents as well. But it's really in the agendas. It gives hope, I think.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much. Back to you, Alberto.
Thank you very much, Tanya and Tobias. Very interesting example. Again, I have to say 3 incredibly inspiring examples, the 3 of them. They give hope, as you say, Tanya. This is really a line that we are following that is going somewhere very, very important and interesting, I would say. I have to say that there are many, many questions. And as I said before, first of all, there are lots of them in the chat. I'm trying to collect some of them, but I encourage the speakers to actually try to respond to those questions there, because we will definitely won't have time to go over all of them. Also, to let me know if there is anything else also added during the time that is still remaining. And we have many questions also that were coming before, actually, that were sent by participants in advance to the meeting. So it's a challenge, I have to say, to select some questions, but I have selected some specific ones for our colleagues, especially from the examples view. And after we'll go back also to our panelists to have some kind of general message also to see where we are going from here. So to start with, maybe a question for Johan. It's a very interesting one, actually related with also the overall strategy. At the first place, could an option be a strategy to reduce food loss before retail? Thinking in the agricultural context, of course, in the food production.
Yes, there's a lot of things that we can do within the food industry, and actually there's a lot of things we don't know, and we should start with just mapping all the byproducts and residual products from the food industry. But we know there's a lot of things out there that's is not registered as waste, but we know it will just be composted and sent to biogas. So I think that's the first start to mapping and start to use the same metrics. And sorry, but were we talking about the retailers as well?
Well, it's mainly thinking also on the food loss. If it's we are focused on the food loss to start with before the discussion about many other things.
Yes, and food loss, there's a lot of things we need to do that as well. But I think we need to raise awareness among consumers. That's, I think, a very large challenge we have in Sweden, and especially when it comes to try new, different kind of food. And I just have to go to my kids, and they're kind of a drive-through generation. They want everything to be very simple and clean and cheap, and they want it now. And when we try different food on them, they don't want to eat because we got away from the way of making foods that our parents or grandparents made food. They took care of the whole animal, but today we just want the easiest part and not really much taste. So I think we need to go back and learn how to take full responsibility of using the full vegetable and the full animal.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I have to say, when it comes to youth, I think we have things to learn, and it's important that actually there is a driver there that helps us to advance, actually. So that is very helpful also to think in our kids and how the things are advancing. They're probably faster than we do somehow. Let me jump now to a different, because we have different examples and the questions are really very varied. Thinking in the construction bit. So this is a question for Andrea. Can new building products based on recovered or recycled wood materials become a game changer to upscale wood use in the construction sector? So very much about what you were also mentioning before and during your example presentation.
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's doable. It's possible. What we figured out is, or what the research proved is, it's possible. We just need to add a little bit of research in terms of investigations, but it can become a real game changer, because we need to shift to bio-based material, as I said before, and we don't have enough. And the other thing that's really, really important in the construction industry is that we focus on the existing building stock. So I think nobody wants to hear this at the moment, but Europe has been built, and all these sort of like voices that say we need, in Germany, we say we need 400,000 new flats. But we need to reduce the amount of square meters per person. This is also a sufficiency thing. So we need to focus on the existing building stock to renovate it. And here again, bio-based materials are the ones to be used, because we can extend, because we have a light material, and we can really do good renovations without scrutinizing our building stock, because we have to fulfill building physics matters and so forth. So waste would be the ideal scenario in order to resolve all these questions. It's really important that we focus on this. And yes, you're right. It'll become a game changer.
Thank you. And now switching to the third example, also thinking in the fibers. This is a question for Tanya. It's a very simple question, but it's interesting actually. What is the demand for circular textile fibers in the market?
Yeah, actually, we just calculated it with a really big group of leading industry experts and had the horizon in 2030. So we calculated that for cotton-like recycled textile fibers, the demand is 4.5 million tons. This is obviously supported by the consumer behavior and the developing regulation and so forth, but the demand is high and the announced capacity commitments are really kind of behind. So there is huge like a huge market to fill with that type of products. And obviously we are not the only player in this field, but we aim to tackle part of that demand, obviously.
Thank you very much. So there are opportunities actually to consider.
Oh yes, there is a lot of waste that needs to be kind of upscaled.
And maybe, as I said, we really can't tackle every question, but I really would like to hear, because there is an interesting question I saw in the chat, and I think it will be interesting for everybody also to hear from the three of you, from your examples, things that have not worked. So we can try to avoid, others can try to avoid in future. So maybe in a kind of 1 minute or one key message from your side, some things that will help and that will be useful to hear from your side. But maybe Johan, if you want to start.
Yes, I can start. We had an interesting project with building industry and the fashion industry, and we wanted to upcycle those straps, lifting stripes you use for lifting heavy equipment. And to recycle those, it's very good polyester, and use it for buttons and other things in fashion. But we could see after spending a lot of time in research that there was no efficient way to get the logistics working for this. So, but there was a demand and there was a research, but it was too costly to collect this waste.
Thank you. Very helpful to share this also honest answer. Maybe from your side, Andrea.
I would probably recommend that if you look into the industry, building dismantling is obviously a very important thing. So this is how you provide the next material range. So what we learned is and you might remember the picture that I showed from the waste wood just dumped onto the ground, you need to have a good dismantling concept in place, because what happens now is that the builders, they cut everything into very small pieces. And although we have technology in order to join shorter pieces again, but this is time consuming. So this is a recommendation: do invest a little bit more money into a good dismantling concept and do it properly, and then you have a very valuable resource.
Thank you very much. And Tanya, from your side.
Yeah, maybe it was in the beginning focus a little bit lacking, because our technology can take in all type of cellulose rich waste streams like cardboard, rice straws, and so forth. But in order to make it happen, we really needed to focus, and from customer side, we realized that textile to textile recycling is the ones that they would like to kind of put their efforts to in the beginning. So kind of with the small group of people, focus to make it to happen. I would say pick with that one. There are obviously many more, but.
Thank you very much. Definitely, actually, the three of you are saying many kind of short messages, but I'm sure that there will be many things to say about how to help others actually to go in the direction that is useful for the future. As I said, there are many questions still in the chat. We will try to collect them, and actually maybe we will try to come back to you in some of them, because there are really very interesting ones. Also, some of the ones that were collected during the preparation of this webinar today. But now slowly we need to go to the end of this discussion, and what we have for you before we end is a poll to close the discussion about what will be the key takeaway messages that you will have from today. This poll will come now, and you feel free to write what you think that is useful there. And in the meanwhile, we are going to hear from our panelists at the beginning only a 1-minute headline message. What will be the key takeaway that they take from this discussion today themselves? So let's start with Tobias.
Okay, thank you very much. I think a key takeaway is that the solutions are already there. They're already on the table. And we need policies, investors, and others to help make this the norm. We need new policy frameworks to enable this, so that Tanya and others don't keep getting a question of how can they scale up their solutions. They're already there.
Thank you. That was really to the point. Thank you very much. Sonia?
Yeah, thank you. So we've seen that it's not really usual to reuse or recycle bio-based material, but from all the wonderful examples, it's clear that we can, as Tobias has said. And I think we need to inspire more innovation in this direction, that we are not stuck into, well, as my students are always doing, just making compostable, and that's fine, but really look into a circular use of bio-based materials, that we reuse and reuse them again, and yeah, get more innovation on that.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Tim?
I think getting as much value from what we have, I think that's the starting point. I love what my Munk Andersen wrote in the chat, that there's a tendency to treat biogas fertilizers and feed as a kind of the normal, and that's accepted. And I think we can be much more ambitious with the biomass. And I think that's why I like the Axe Foundation case in particular. And I think we have the solutions. We need to direct more attention to those, and we need to be, this can be done. So we need to kind of point to these solutions that work and set out a course. So we need the policy targets as well for resources and directing the focus to biomass. So I am a bit optimistic after this.
Thank you. That's, I think, what we should be actually optimistic. Barbara, maybe also for the last bit from the policy side.
Sure. I mean, I agree with what has been said as well, and I feel very inspired after this meeting by the examples, because it just underscores how vital and how much potential circular economy solutions have to transform our production and consumption systems. And I also take note from some of our speakers saying that policy is needed to provide this helpful framework to enable such solutions, that they are circular economy, biodiversity, climate, and nature-based solutions. So in that spirit, I think it's good for us to continue to work towards ensuring policy coherence in the circular economy and biodiversity nexus. And also to say that showcasing more examples like these in the policy discussion here in Brussels would be extremely helpful and illustrative. So thank you very much to all of our speakers, really.
And I can only join you, Barbara, in thanking very much everybody. Now we have a word cloud here in front of us about the takeaway messages from today. It's really very varied and rich. I can read some keywords that I see here: policy, education, biomass, bio-based materials, circular solutions, examples, sharing experience. Well, I think that this is more or less what we were trying to do today. So I can only thank very much all our speakers here today. So Tobias, Sonia, Tim, Barbara, but also, of course, Andrea, Johan, and Tanya, and Alice from the EESC, and Maria from the EESC, by the way, because we always have to remember that this is part of the whole context in the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Thank you very much for the rich discussion today. We are exactly 29, so we are about to finish our time now here. You will have, as I said, the recording available very soon in the website of the EESC, also in the YouTube channel. And as I said, we'll try to come back to some of the questions that were raised today, because it was a very rich discussion, and it was unfortunately not possible to come up with an answer to all the questions that were raised. Thank you very much, and with this we close this discussion. Thank you.